Well, look, as always with these things, we don't really know, and anyone that tells you directly that they know is lying. But we know reasonably for sure that we know he's been stood down, and the party plenum, which is coming forth, will see his replacement. The best bet we have, knowing who he is, so as the defence minister, it's different to the defence minister, say, in Australia. So the people that run the military in China are the Central Military Commission, and there's a lot of them. And the guy that heads it up is this guy you might know called Xi Jinping. So for him to leave doesn't really leave a huge chink in the armour. It's not a significant thing. It's a very collective industry, China's defence ministry. So probably corruption charges. I can talk a bit more about that if you want.
Yeah, if you can, yes. What do we know?
I mean, the best is, you look at what he's in there for. He's an aerospace engineer, and he was in charge of procurement for the Central Military Commission of the Armed Forces since 2017, and procurement particularly of high-tech equipment to upgrade the PLA's rocket force. And that offers both the opportunity for corruption, but also the opportunity to mess things up. And there'd sort of been criticism of the rocket force not really delivering on its promise. So before he was booted, a few weeks earlier, two generals in the rocket force, the head of the rocket force, were gotten rid of as well. So it's probably linked to that.
And also others have left before them as well, including Foreign Minister Qin Gang. What do we know about his departure?
Well, Qin Gang is a very different category, and in some ways the Foreign Minister is far less significant than anyone on the Central Military Commission. Like they're way, way down the rankings compared to the Defence Minister. But his departure, again, no one knows for sure, but far more colourful in a way than Li Shangfu. It is alleged to involve this TV presenter who, he had an affair with, and this possibly is the line that had crossed for the party, she was going to have his child via surrogacy. And that's seen as a little bit, for a very socially conservative party, that was seen as just going way, way too far.
Quite scandalous, and very different reasons if that was the case. China doesn't have a defence minister at the moment now, so what will this mean for next week's meeting of foreign defence officials in Beijing?
So if you're referring to the upcoming meeting, we may get a hint as to who is going to replace him. So he can't be formally replaced because his main position on the Central Military Commission is a party position, and we've got to wait for the party plenum for him to be replaced. But whoever steps into his shoes, that should give us a fair guide as to who's going to take over from him.
Okay.
And Reuters have been speculating, but it's really just speculation. We'll see who shows up.
We'll find out soon. Also next month, Anthony Albanese will be the first Australian leader to visit China for quite some time. How significant will this trip be?
Look, for both sides, it's immensely significant. We've seen a huge warming of relations. The dropping of tariffs on wine was something I have to say I didn't see coming. The release of Chang'e as well a couple of weeks ago was a huge step forward in the relationship. So yeah, for both sides, it's quite important. There are still, things to be dropped on the Australian side as far as tariffs go. And for Beijing, they're struggling with their economic rebound, so they really need all the friends they can find. So yeah, it's very significant for both sides. Anniversary of Gough Whitlam recognising China, of course. So there's extra Labor Party significance there for Albanese. But yeah, it's only 8 more sleeps, so we'll see how it goes.
Well, it comes shortly after Anthony Albanese's all-important visit to the US, where President Joe Biden made mention of China several times. What did you make of his comments?
Yeah, it was a curious speech. I mean, it really seemed to be signalling that, although there are these big things going on in Ukraine and in Israel and in Gaza, we're not going to take our eye off what's going on with China. There was a very curious aside where he talked about Xi Jinping saying to Biden that, why did he spend so much time worrying about Australia, kind of implying that, with this sort of small, insignificant country, why is the US taking heat for us. And Biden's response, apparently, according to him, was that, well, the US is a Pacific country and we're strong allies, et cetera, et cetera. But it's very curious because it almost suggested that the US was getting a little bit anxious about how warm things were getting with Beijing and just sort of to say, look, cool things off a bit, if you like.
Interesting. Well, a major part of that trip was the AUKUS partnership. How does Beijing view this deal?
AUKUS is viewed extremely dimly in Beijing, simply because of the nature of the submarines. So the previous submarines were not seen as aggressive towards a potential conflict in the Taiwan Strait. The nuclear submarines, much more powerful, much greater range, and much more threatening, if you like, to China, because they're a more effective submarine. I won't get into the merits of whether or not we should be spending, 300 plus billion on these things, but certainly Beijing is not at all fond of the AUKUS arrangement.
Sadly, we don't have enough time to discuss that, but we will squeeze in maybe one or two more questions, Graeme. In terms of trade, how far is there to go before that bilateral relationship between Australia and China is back on track?
Well, we're still waiting on lobsters. That, much like wine, there's no big lobby industry in China that wants our lobsters. It's just rich people who enjoy a good lobster. So the dropping of the wine tariffs will certainly be, seen as heartening for the lobster industry, which really is one that was very, very hard hit by these tariffs. A lot of other industries managed to find other markets. The lobsters and the high-end wine, not so much. So, yeah, they'll be encouraged. Barley was kind of expected because barley is an input for Chinese beer, and the beer lobby over there is incredibly strong. And, people were saying, we want the malt barley, we can't replace it with anything else. So, yeah, barley was kind of expected. We'll see. The other thing, of course, is Dr. Yang Heng-jun,
Yes.
who is still imprisoned in Beijing, we believe. So it's, that's still on the agenda. There's still a hostage in the room, shall we say.
Any other issues that will be raised with China when Prime Minister Albanese visits Beijing?
Look, I think it's going to be one of those, in keeping with the reset of the relationship a little bit. I think if things are raised, they'll be raised in a very low-key sort of a way. It is, as I mentioned, very important for Labor Party history in a way, because it was the ALP that recognised China. And it is, in many ways a celebration of the anniversary as much as anything. So if things are raised, I expect they'll be raised in a fairly low-key way. But I expect Dr. Yang will be very high on the list of his concerns.
Okay, well, we will be watching closely, as you will be too, I expect. Graeme Smith, thank you. We'll talk to you soon again.
Thanks, Yvonne.